Louisiana. Key facts. Abbreviation LA. Nickname Bayou State, Pelican State, Sportsman's Paradise. Capital Baton Rouge. Flower Magnolia. Tree Bald Cypress. Bird Brown Pelican. Dog Catahoula Leopard Dog. Motto Union, Justice, Confidence. Beignets, lagniappes, jambalaya and gumbo, jazz, jealousies and jelly shots, street cards, the levee and Tabasco, po' boys, Zydeco, voodoo and the bayou. Bienvenue à Nouveau Orleans. Southern Louisiana is dominated by New Orleans, a city of such distinctness and quality that it has earned more than nicknames than New York. The Big Easy, the Crescent City, 504, NOLA, the city that care forgot. I came here once before, sent by Paramount Studios in 1997 to get background for a screenplay adaptation of John Kennedy Toole's great New Orleans novel A Confederacy of Dances. Since that visit, one catastrophic event in late August 2005 has reshaped everything we think about this enchantingly seductive town. Hurricane Katrina. For New Orleans, time is divided into pre-Katrina and post-Katrina. Mardi Gras. I arrived at the beginning of February, a good time to visit, for it is the weekend leading up to Fat Tuesday, the literal English translation of Mardi Gras. In Britain we call it Shrove Tuesday and celebrate with pancakes. In more observant times, this day preceding Ash Wednesday was when the faithful said their goodbye to meat, for it signaled the start of Lent and 40 days of fasting and prayer. The Latin for goodbye meat is carnevale, hence the word carnival. With the possible exceptions of Rio de Janeiro and Aberdeen, no town carnivals like New Orleans. I was lying about Aberdeen. You had better have a strong head and a forgiving liver if you mean to enjoy New Orleans at Mardi Gras. Fat Tuesday is merely the culmination of Fat Saturday, Fat Sunday and Fat Monday. Each of these days sees drinking, parades, drinking, marching bands, drinking, the wearing of costumes, drinking, and drinking. By Sunday, the gutters in the streets of the French Quarter are already filled with hundreds of thousands of shining green, gold and purple beads. Green for faith, gold for power, and purple for justice, the official colors of the New Orleans Mardi Gras. In Bourbon Street, this cozy touristic heart of the quarter, there is also human matter of not dissimilar color in the gutters. But let us try to concentrate on the positive. Necklaces of these colored beads are dropped from every balcony and hurled from every parade float. It is impossible to walk 10 yards without becoming festooned. With the beads comes a growing acceptance of the spirit of Mardi Gras. I soak up that spirit and suck it down too in the form of jelly shots, the kind of disgusting alcohol for people who don't like grown-up alcoholic drinks, in which America specializes. The kind of disgusting comestible, in fact, one is secretly pleased to have an excuse guiltily to enjoy from time to time. In the time off between visiting Florida and coming here to Louisiana, I filmed for the BBC in Brazil, where I managed to break my right arm in Amazonia. So for my journeys through the French Quarter, I am escorted by the members of the film crew who protect me from being barged by those revelers too lost in drink to notice that my arm is in a sling. At the bar of Napoleon's on Charter Street, I fall into conversation with a group of boisterous New Orleanians and get a lesson in how to pronounce the name of the town. No two of them appears to agree, native-born as they all are. New Orleans, New Orleans, New Orleans, New Orleans, New Orleans. They all seem to be acceptable. Indeed, what is not acceptable in this sphere of a town? My new friends offered the opinion that New Orleans has more in common with the great ports of the world, Marseille, Rio, Amsterdam, London, Sydney, than it does with any other American cities, except perhaps San Francisco, which is also a port, of course. They offer me much to eat and drink too. If nothing else, they say, I must eat a muffaletta sandwich, a feast of cheese and olive salad and good bread. A beignet, a square donut dusted with ice and sugar, and drink a milk punch, a kind of brandy Alexander made with bourbon instead of cognac. I do all three gratefully and totter away into the night. All cities of consequence have their own ways of eating and drinking, and their specialities always seem to taste best in situ. By the time Tuesday itself comes, I'm beginning to feel my age a little as I limp at 8 in the morning, a mile and a half to the back of the queue of carnival floats that winds all the way around the Superdome Convention Center. That same Superdome that was a scene of such awful misery, stench, and despair in the hours and days following Katrina. I'm amongst the Zulus. It is hard to explain quite who and what the Zulus are. They're a kind of club or crew made up predominantly of African Americans, and every year thousands of them pay to take part in the parade. It began the early 20th century as a kind of spoofing of the White Rex, the official Mardi Gras king, and has grown into a mammoth, integral, and hugely popular element of the carnival. Zulus, black up, despite already being that color, put on fuzzy wigs, whiten their lips and eyes, and lob thousands of painted coconuts into the crowds as they pass through the streets. This is all about mocking white America's old tradition of mammy-style minstrelsy. When I talk of walking a mile and a half, I'm not exaggerating. The Zulu parade is at least that long and takes many hours to pass by. Each float is pulled by a tractor, and each float has its name, theme, and tradition. The rest of Fat Tuesday flies by in a whirl. What I do and where I go, I shall probably never know. Oystering with the Croats. I wake up in my hotel room on Ash Wednesday, fully ready to do penance and be shriven for my sins. Down to the very mouth of the Mississippi I go, to join the crew of an early morning oyster boat, all of whom happen to be Croatian. Croats started coming to Louisiana to work on the oysterman over a century ago, and they are still coming to this day. With my arm in a sling, it is my pleasure to stand back and swallow a freshly shucked bio oysters from time to time while they haul nets and sort the catch. The sun shines in a cloudless sky, the pelicans flap lazily above us, and all is well. But there is no one you can talk to in southern Louisiana who does not have their story of Katrina. Here, huge 10-ton boats were flung around like dried leaves. John, the captain of our oystermen, tells how the levee, defending the road and the neighborhood, broke. The water came up to his house to a level of 17 feet. John is a prosperous fisherman, and he has been able to rebuild. It has been hard, but he is back at work with a new and better defended home. For others, the story has been much, much tougher. The lower ninth. After saying goodbye to John and his crew, I travel to a district that has died. The Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans was once a vibrant, humming community of African Americans, about 2.5 square miles in size, lying below, hence the lower in its name, the Mississippi and the Industrial Canal that forms one side of its boundary. If any piece of land anywhere in the world is below a piece of water, whether it be the sea or river or canal or lake, it is necessary to defend that land, else it will, gravity being gravity and water being water, become a piece of that sea, river, canal, or lake. The Lower Ninth was defended by a levee. For those of us who pre-Katrina only knew the word levee, thanks to the song American Pie, as a place to take a chevy and watch good old boys drinking whiskey and dry, it is worth thinking of a levee as simply raised earth. A bank built between land and water to protect the former from being flooded by the latter. In the fens of East Anglia and the polder lands of Holland they are called dikes, but the principle is the same everywhere. On the night of 23rd of August 2005 came Katrina, the third strongest hurricane ever to make landfall in the United States. Nowhere was the destruction more terrible than in the Lower Ninth. Water poured in from at least 3 different sources, from St. Bernard Parish above, and from 2 bridges of the Industrial Canal, one of which brought with it a huge barge which itself flattened buildings as it barreled along in the surge. The force of the floodwater alone was great enough to pull buildings out from their concrete foundations. I am told that 1,600 citizens of the Lower Ninth died as a result. Today, 2.5 years later, the area is a stinking, rat-infested wasteland, a terrible, desolated rectangle of waist-high weeds and rubble. What appeared to be randomly placed stoops, chimney breasts, fallen roofs, and mailboxes offer pathetic reminders that it was once unbelievably a place where thousands lived out their lives. In a state of horrible fright, bewilderment, and disbelief, I drive around in the company of Isaiah, a young man from the neighborhood. Isaiah was on his way to Iraq for his second tour of military duty there when Katrina struck. A self-possessed, articulate, intelligent, handsome, and charismatic young man, Isaiah the patriot, the Marine who fought twice for his country, has found himself politicized, radicalized even, by what he and so many from the Lower Ninth see as the neglect and betrayal of his people. At the local, city, state, and federal level, he feels nothing has been done. These are wild black people, looting savages, we're well rid of them. That is how he bitterly characterizes what he interprets as the establishment's response to the devastation of the world. More sinister theories suggest that the Lower Ninth was deliberately sacrificed, that the breaches of the levee were avoidable, may even have been purposely made to protect other, more valuable parishes and districts, such as French Quarter. I cannot judge the truth of this, but I can certainly attest to the bitterness and sense of betrayal prevalent in the blighted neighborhood. I visit Augustine, Isaiah's grandmother, and can see the newly created layers of misery and anger that would have grown over a woman who was otherwise born to love and to enjoy life. Even through the misery of her present existence, she, her grandson, and other friends insist on our taking a photograph on her porch. In 1965, Hurricane Betsy flooded the Lower Ninth. President Lyndon Johnson was there immediately, she tells me, promising aid which arrived and with which the Lower Ninth was rebuilt. This time around, after an admittedly more destructive storm, it is as if, in his opinion, the entire 2.5 square miles has been written off. The Lower Ninth, he reflects, was always a poor district but was notable for containing not one single housing project, the equivalent of our British council houses and flats. 90% was made up of owner-occupied housing. Being poor and living on the edge, these were the kind of people who could least afford insurance. As far as the most extreme white citizens are concerned, the denizens of the Lower Ninth were out with guns, looting, raping, and pillaging the first night after Katrina. As far as the most extreme black citizens are concerned, their neighbors and their whole community were cold-bloodedly and deliberately murdered. Katrina left a legacy of physical destruction, but perhaps it is the destruction of faith, morale, and trust, which is the most terrible of all. The bright beads of the necklace of the American dream are in the gutter. Voodoo. That night I attended a voodoo ceremony in the Marigny district. We crossed Desire Street to get there. The trolley buses that one finds all over New Orleans, known as streetcars, used to come as far as out of Marigny and would bear the name of the last street at which they stopped, much as the tube train in London bears the name Cockfosters or High Barnet. Tennessee Williams, the great Southern playwright, was very taken by the common sight back in the 40s of a streetcar which would carry the name Desire. The wood itself disappointingly lacks any effigy stabbing or zombie raising, but turns out to be yet another mixture of positive energy and wild dancing. Not unlike Laurie Cabot and her witches in Salem, Massachusetts back at Halloween. Angola. It is time to move away from New Orleans. Never an easy thing to do. She is one of those cities one never wants to leave. We travel upstate towards Mississippi. On the way we stop off at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Angola, once one of the most notoriously terrible and feared prisons in America. Originally a place for breeding slaves whose stock came from southwest Africa, hence the name, Angola is now a prison farm. A huge parcel of land the size of Manhattan, it is given over to cattle, crops, and cultivation. The prisoners, so long as they toe the line, eschew drugs and gang culture, can learn to work the land. We're shown round by the ebullient warden Burl Kane. Is that a name straight from Southern fiction or what? Who is particularly pleased with his dogs. By dogs, one or two of whom are crossed with wolves, go for foolish escapees and arm. Trail dogs are bloodhounds capable of tracking people across rivers and through any number of false scents, and drug-sniffing dogs can detect 1/10 of a gram of cocaine in a bag of cinnamon powder. Despite this fearsomely efficient bestiary, Warden Burl is pleased to have turned round his person's reputation not with draconian discipline, cruelty, and threats, but with a combination of motivational techniques and old-time religion. He is careful to make it plain that it is not the nature of the religious that matters, merely the sense of refuge and self-respect that any religion can engender. The atheistical and religionist in me bridles, but results are results. Angola is a place for lifers and death row convicts. Certain crimes in Louisiana are punished with no option whatever for parole. What motivation to behave will a prisoner have if he knows he will never see freedom, however much he toes the line? Somehow, despite this inbuilt problem, Warden Burl seems to have turned the place round. Nonetheless, I'm glad to leave. This slice of northern Louisiana, not far from the Mississippi state line, Reminds me forcibly that we are outside the orbit of New Orleans now. Hound dogs, a dose of religion, death row, and men called Burl. It truly is another world. I head for the state line feeling like a visitor from outer space, and loving it.